Hello there everyone, welcome to this gaming video. You know who I am, E.T. Templar, Alien Crusader from Beyond the Heavens, here to entertain and destroy through the power of me magic. And of course, this is another gaming video where I'm playing Wingman and I'm playing Conquest. And this is probably, again, I keep saying this over and over again, one of my favorite games recently. And mainly, if you know me, I love anything and everything to do about planes, especially military ones. And the main reasoning for that is ever since I was just a young kid, my dad drugged me out to quite a few air shows. There was George's Air Force Base out back in California, and Apple Valley, they had air shows, and it's just such an experience. And there's a story where the Thunderbirds were there, and they were doing these maneuvers, and they do it in such a way where you're looking at the two other planes, and the one thing you're not aware of is the third plane that's doing a low pass, going about, I don't know how fast, but it's like hauling ass. And you don't see the third plane, so you're looking at the two other planes. And all of a sudden, this third one approaches behind you at low altitude. And, oh man, made me jump so bad. But everyone else in the crowd knew it was coming, but I didn't. And I jumped out of my skin. And that was quite the experience. If you've seen the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds and the F-16s, it's an experience. Even if you are have bad seats or in a bad area to where you can't really see them, or even if it's like a crowded air show, it's such a treasure to even see that. And this plane here is the PW Mark 1. It is pretty damn... God, these guys are all over my ass. It is probably one of the best planes out there because its handling is ridiculous. In fact, it might have, if that's my one complaint, too much handling. But it has your standard missiles, and it has a frickin' railgun. And I'm going to show that off here. Right, come here, you little bastard. The only problem is you have to really... Let me see if I can't line up a good shot. Okay. I need to get close. Come on. Oh, and that's the railgun. It's right here on the bottom. It's a big ass. Probably fires a tungsten rod or something like that. Something ridiculous. And this plane also has a multi-launch universal weapon. And I'll show you. It's a multi-lock. Ooh, just in time for a strike fleet. So we're going to multi-lock and all these dudes in front of us. And it just sends out a swarm of what I would guess to be miniaturized tracking rockets, which I'm not entirely sure is a thing in our world, but in Project Wingman's world, apparently they have micro missiles that lock onto multiple targets, and it's universal, which means it can target air, ground, and sea. It's just anything in front of you. Which I'm fairly certain that that's a technology that doesn't exist in our world yet, or to my knowledge. Of course, these airships are freaking cool. That's one thing I love about this game. I'll do one more mission since I kind of cakewalked through that one. Of course, this is another game. This game's more for mediocre to advanced gamers because it requires quite a bit. So it could also be for casual, I guess, if you have it on easy. It could be relatively a relative cakewalk. But Conquest is a cool game. It does have a storyline and a main campaign. But Conquest is fun because you have like 42 or 43 zones to capture. And the more damage you do to the enemy, the more the alert level rises. So you get to the point where after alert level 14, the Federation is just sending tons of shit at you. They're throwing everything. Fleets, ace squadrons. And yeah, it gets pretty damn crazy at the higher alert levels. And the replayability is there. Later, make 31. Of course, this plane has dual cannons, dual 20 millimeters, which is pretty OP at close range. Or at least I assume it's dual 20s because it fires so slow. Yeah, we'll leave the ground targets alone. Those are boring. Whoa. Of course, you have unlimited flares. And of course, in real life, I think you might have 1 or 2 sets of those. Which, of course, if you don't know, flares are ejected. They burn at hundreds or maybe even 1,000 or so degrees. It's phosphorus. So if someone fires a heat-seeking missile at you, it misdirects it away from the plane. Or that's the idea, anyway. Doesn't always work. Especially, like in the 90s or 2000s, the Serbs shot down I would say a F-18 or a F-16, and they did it by firing 2 missiles. You see, the common thing is they'll fire 1 missile, so the pilot engages the countermeasures, and that missile misses, and then they fire a second one, and by then, there's no more countermeasures, so the second one usually gets the job done. And speaking of the Yugoslavian Civil War in the 90s and 2000s, the Serbs are also the only country in the world, I think, to shoot down a stealth F-117 Nighthawk. And it was actually rather impressive how they did it. They had spies in Italy at the time. And basically they saw it take off from Italy, and they tracked it. And during this time, the NATO forces didn't know, but the Serbs had actually cracked the NATO radio codes, and they were listening in. So they were tracking this plane across to its area that it was going to do whatever it needed to be done. And the Serbs actually shot down by one Serbian officer or Ukrainian anti-air captain by the name of Zoltan Dani. And weirdly enough, the pilot, well, not weirdly enough, but the pilot survived. The F-117 pilot survived. And they became friends after the war ended. So the pilot and the guy who shot him down became good friends, and they actually visited each other when the conflict was over. And I think that's I love heartwarming stories like that, because usually it shows the humanity on both sides. And when crap like that happens in real life, it's like that's that shows the character of not only the Serbian soldier, but the American one as well. And if that's the true tragedy to wars, is that good men in uniforms either side of the conflict die needlessly for the sake of politicians and special interests. And of course that depends on one's opinion about various conflicts. But yeah, usually. But that's not so much the case anymore. Anymore, it's just mostly terrorists and soldiers. And of course, there's no humanizing terrorists in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, if you want to, the Yugoslav War or Civil War is a pretension, like one of the most hardcore modern conflicts, because you have Croatians, you have Serbs, you have Bosniaks, and it was pretty nuts historically. And if you're going to do any historical research, do it yourself. Don't go to mainstream media. Don't because usually what tends to happen is people love to demonize the Serbs when both sides were committing war crimes. The Croatians, in particular, were also committing war crimes, but their war crimes get buried under the history books because they were our ally. We were backing them. And because they were Western sympathetic, we were backing them. Whereas the Serbs were backed by Russian elements and other groups. So that's also another thing you have to keep in mind when you're researching anything about that, because you get some pretty biased historical opinions. Of course, I'm not justifying war crimes in any way, shape, or form, but you can't really hold one side to a standard of courts and Geneva Conventions when you ignore the other side just because you're your ally. And that's one thing I'll cover too for a second. Last time I was in Germany, I went to the Nuremberg, where they had the Nuremberg court, and what a kangaroo bullshit court thing that was. Basically what happened, it was a trial only for Germans and Nazis. But the thing that irritated me about it is that the Russians committed heinous war crimes during the war and before the war. But did any one of those people see the inside of a jail cell? No, they didn't, because, again, they were our allies, and we let them skate on doing horrendous human rights violations. And, it was interesting to be there. It was interesting to be in that very courtroom, but I really could have done without seeing that in Germany, just because what a kangaroo court shit it was. And you couldn't really... And it was more like Germany was on trial. And to this day, Germany is still on trial. You still have people condemning Germany for... Anyways. Whereas it's also interesting, these American socialists, Marxists, and communists always brush under the rug the crimes of the USSR. You got the Holodomor massacre. You have them starving the Ukrainians. It even got so bad that Ukrainians started eating horses and shit. And when they ran out of horses, well, you want to know what the other kind of meat they went for? The other white meat. Cannibalism. But then again, that gets all swept under the rug because... Russia was our allies against the Grand War against fascism. And that's why I also love and hate history, is because, remember, the history books are always written by the victor, and the victor always paints the picture, regardless of how full of propaganda horseshit it is. So hopefully you enjoyed this weird video and me ranting about history and shit like that. Drop a like, drop a dislike. Thanks for watching. Drop a comment or two if you so want, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks again. Thanks for watching. Oh, come on, man. Come on, man.